One of the tenets of that series of disciplines called embodied cognition, cognitive linguistics, experiential philosophy, experiential psychology, those areas, one of their founding principles is that because of the way the human mind has evolved, then we're not, strictly speaking, capable of conceptualizing abstract ideas. We talk about abstract ideas, fine, but ideas which don't make a direct impact on the senses, which aren't realizable, have to be talked about in other terms. We can't talk about abstract things directly. And the key method for doing that, apparently, is through the use of metaphor, conceptual metaphor. These ideas are expounded in the work of Lakoff and Johnson, in Nunez, and many others. And part of that idea is that such metaphors form schema. This is particularly prevalent in Mark Johnson's work, schema or image schema, in which sets of metaphors bundled together into kind of narratives or in kind of scenes, the entailments of which and the details of which structure the abstract concept or structure a concept which would, if it wasn't for this metaphorical mapping, be abstract and therefore unavailable to thought. One of the schema that I'm particularly interested in at the moment is an extension of a piece of conceptual mapping which is very common in conceptual metaphor theory, which is the metaphor to do with knowing and to do with knowledge. And that idea is that knowing is seeing. Because knowledge, is an abstract concept, you can't touch it, feel it, you can't hold it up against the wall and photograph it, and other sort of things are available in terms of knowledge. We can only think about knowing by imagining it as something else, by mapping it from a concrete idea, metaphorically. And as I say, the most common metaphor for knowledge is seeing. Extensions of the seeing metaphor, or rather extensions of what knowledge might be, could perhaps be expanded by thinking what the conditions of seeing are, to think what sort of entailments carry over from the act of seeing and become part of the structure of the conceptual idea of knowing. Obviously not all the entailments carry over. That's standard within all metaphorical mapping, that some elements of the metaphor are left out, and certainly in the knowing is seeing map. There's no, for example, equivalent to the optic nerve, for example. The optic nerve is a fundamental part of seeing, but there's no equivalent for it in the conceptual metaphor of knowing. Similarly, the V1, V2 areas of the brain, all the rest of the sort of neurological apparatus of seeing doesn't carry over into the metaphor. I think some aspects of the act of seeing do carry over, though, or could be interesting to consider if they do carry over. And the first of those is that seeing, well, first of all, it requires a space in which this seeing happens. It's so obvious that it's hardly worth mentioning, it seems trivial, but I think without the space in which the object exists and in which the seer exists, seeing clearly can't happen. So there's something about that metaphor which implies the existence of space. And as I've already suggested, that space has some properties. There are some necessary conditions of that space. Both the object and the seer, the object of knowledge and the knower of that knowledge, must exist in the same space. Also, they must exist within a certain sort of proximal range. Seeing, the act of literal, physical seeing, requires that the object of sight be not too far away, not too close, not behind you. So it's possible that that proximal quality transfers over as well to the conceptual metaphor knowing is seeing, something to do with space. Also, something that perhaps to do with occlusion. I can't see, well, I'm looking across at a canal that's in front of me now, and I know but behind the canal is a golf course. But I can't see the golf course because there's trees and there's a sort of a bank of earth in front of me, which is preventing me looking onto the golf course. So part of seeing requires there be a clear line of sight between the seer and the object of that vision. And it's possible that that metaphor also becomes part of the metaphor. That is an entailment which may be relevant. The lack of any sort of obstruction or occluding object. And probably one of the more important ones, I suspect, is that this space in which the seer and the seen, the knower and the object of knowledge exist, this space must be brightly lit, must be illuminated. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning right now, and the sun is undoubtedly up, but if I'd been out 2 hours ago, it would be very dark where I am right now, and I wouldn't be able to see a damn thing. So the presence of light must be a key element within the conceptual metaphor knowing is seeing. That must be an entailment which carries over, I'm sure.